In this video, we're gonna go through 7 different ways that you can get cinematic footage with your DJI Air 3. All right, let's get into it. So with every drone that comes out, there's different unique features with each drone that when used right will give you better looking footage. And whenever you hear someone say cinematic footage, what that means is more like a movie. Or another way to think about it is that footage that has a little bit more planning put into it and it creates more of an emotional response rather than just putting your drone up, getting a wide shot with horrible lighting and it just doesn't look that good. The goal of getting cinematic footage is getting good looking footage so that your videos stand out. All right, so number 1 is gonna be that 70mm camera. Use that camera as much as possible. Having a 70mm lens on a drone is a huge advantage of the Air 3. And when you use this 3x zoom, it gives you a look that you just can't get on other drones unless you're using something more expensive and bigger. The only other drone that has this focal length is the Mavic 3 Pro, and that's a more expensive drone. And then beyond that, you have to pick up one of the bigger drones like the Inspire or a heavy lift drone where you put a camera on the drone itself and then attach something like a 70mm to that camera. And so because of that, using this lens is gonna make your footage really stand out. And when you use a longer lens, it compresses background elements closer to foreground elements. So this is gonna make things in the distance feel closer and bigger. And also when you're moving with a drone, it's gonna create a lot more parallax. And that's where layers in your shot are moving at different speeds. And so you'll want to use this 70mm lens and really create a lot of parallax, whether it's horizontal parallax when you're spinning around a subject or vertical parallax where you're raising or lowering the drone and the background is moving at a different speed than whatever's in your foreground. Now, number 2 is shoot in log. So out of this drone, you get a standard color profile and you get a log color profile. The standard looks good, but you don't have as much control as the log profile. It's going to have less exposure and less saturation. So your highlights are going to be pulled down and your shadows are going to be pulled up, and then the saturation is going to look grayed out and flat. Now, the reason that you use log for your footage is that you color grade it later. And when you color grade your footage, you can pull more information out of those highlights and out of those shadows, and you can really position your colors in a way that's going to look better than if you just shot in the standard profile. Oftentimes when you're shooting on a drone and you're in the standard profile, things like the sky or the clouds will become overexposed and it just doesn't look as good as when you're able to pull some of that exposure back and really have some texture in those highlights. Now, I have another video on my channel where I go through how you color grade log footage out of DJI drones, and I'll link to that in the description. And also, I have a set of LUTs that I've created specifically for drones. And these LUTs are built specifically for D-Log-M, so when you apply it to the DJI Air 3 footage, it instantly gives you a good look that's more cinematic than if you shot standard. And all the footage that you're seeing in this video are using my set of drone LUTs. Now, number 3 is use waypoints. So in this drone, you get waypoint. You get the ability to set up a flight path for your drone and then hit go, and the drone will automatically go through this flight path. Now, you can get more cinematic looking footage using waypoints because you could set up multiple keyframes in the sky of where you want the drone to move, and it's seamlessly gonna move through all those points and make it super smooth. If you're trying to do these kind of moves manual, oftentimes you'll see little jerky motion unless you're really good on the joysticks and you can get those moves perfect, especially flowing from one move to the next. So take advantage of waypoints and set up shots. And then also, if you're a solo creator like me, using waypoints allows you to get away from using active track in this drone and be able to create some really dynamic moving shots of yourself, and the drone's gonna automatically pilot through that, and you as the solo creator can interact with the scene and move differently than how the drone is flying. These kind of shots look so much better in the edit because there's a level of complexity when a subject is moving through a frame at a different pace and in a different direction than the way that the drone is moving. It looks like there's more people involved to make these shots possible. So take advantage of waypoints and actually set up some shots and really think through how you want the drone to move to go from a big wide shot, then down close, and then maybe turn around here. You could get really creative with how the drone moves in the sky. Now, number 4 involves active track. So you're gonna wanna use the tracking in this drone because you have 360 omnidirectional obstacle avoidance, meaning that if your drone is flying autonomously and being tracking a subject, it's never gonna run into anything. So you can have it track from the side, from the front, from the back, and you're not gonna have to worry about the drone hitting something. It's one huge advantage that this drone has. Now, when you're doing active track style shots, don't just keep your subject right in the center. DJI gives you the ability to move your tracking point around the frame. So you could slide the subject of the shot over to the right side, over to the left side, or you can even pull up or down on the gimbal or justify it so that subject's at the bottom or at the top. And this is super powerful, especially as a solo creator, because you could put yourself into a third rather than always having your subject dead center. So play around with this and put your subject in different parts of the active track so that the shot doesn't feel like it's always dead center, but maybe it's tracking with the person off to the right or the left. So number 5 would be to use post-stabilization. It can clean up your footage to a point where it does feel a lot smoother. And so you can see from this shot here, even though I've stopped, I'm just sitting here and the drone's doing an orbit around me, there's a little bit of wobble. It's up and down, it's kind of moving around. It's not perfect. And so to clean up this shot, I would add a little bit of post-stabilization in Final Cut Pro and play around with the settings to try and get it to look better than what it is right out of camera. And what the stabilization is going to do is crop in on your footage a little bit and try to make the footage so that it doesn't have all these bumps. Now, number 6 is fly close to objects. You have that omnidirectional obstacle avoidance in the Air 3, so use it to your advantage. Get close to objects and don't be as cautious as with other drones and previous models of the Air. And so when you have the omnidirectional obstacle avoidance, you could fly through trees and around objects and have that level of security, knowing that the drone will give you an indication when something's close, and also it will stop so it doesn't run into those objects. And so having this obstacle avoidance is going to allow you to fly closer to objects, which is going to give you more cinematic looking footage because you're going to be able to create layers and depth. And this goes in line with that 70mm lens. When you can get close to objects, things will fill your frame, but then in the distance, you'll have all of these different layers, whether it's hills or buildings or trees, and you'll be able to create these more dynamic looking shots with all of these different layers in your frame and everything moving at different rates. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you go to sport mode, it turns off all your obstacle avoidance. So don't forget that when you're out flying and run into something. Now, number 7 is create big motions and then speed them up in post. Now, with this drone, you can fly fast and you can also fly at a distance and you're gonna have a crystal clear image on your screen the entire time. However, when you're working with huge landscapes, like big sweeping shots, you could create some really interesting footage if you create big motions, so a huge arc around this landscape, and then speed it up even more in post. Even if you're flying in sport mode and you have this drone moving fast, when you're working with huge landscapes with mountains in the distance and big hillsides and big stretches of trees or whatever you're filming, you could create a huge motion. And then what you do is you go in your editing software and double the speed or quadruple the speed so that that big motion happens fast in the frame and it feels like the drone is moving even faster. Now, one thing I like to do when I make these kind of movements is I add some post-stabilization so that it's a perfect move in the edit. And then also, I might either add a zoom in or a zoom out in post, and it creates just another level of motion, especially when working with these big sweeping shots. So you can see from this shot here, the sun is setting in the distance, which is the perfect time to shoot with a drone. And then I have this big arcing motion around. And then what I did is I sped up this shot. Now there's just a ton of motion in the shot, and I'm able to cover a huge distance in a short amount of time, and it looks great. Just has this very cinematic feel to it, especially with the reveal of the mountain in the background. Now, if you want to see more videos on how to get cinematic footage out of your drone, I put together a playlist which goes through all of my videos where I've broken down some different cinematic techniques, or you could check out this video right here, which is my complete drone beginner's guide, so that you can learn everything about your drone and how to fly it in the sky. And if you're someone who's trying to grow your YouTube channel, make sure you head to thecreatorfilmschool.com, and that's where I teach you everything that I learned growing this channel to where it is today. I'll see you on the next one.